So, you're thinking about starting to learn to draw, and maybe you're not sure where to start, or if you can even do it. Well, I'm here to tell you that you can, and to share with you my process when I started teaching myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Kyle. I'm a self-taught part-time artist here on YouTube, and I make videos about my art journey, starting my small art shop. And in today's video, I wanted to share with you some of the things that I did when I started to teach myself art, and hopefully it'll be sort of a mini guide for those of you who are starting to think about learning to draw, or if you're just getting back into it. I'm completely self-taught, and I started taking art a lot more seriously in my 30s. And when I decided that I wanted to start pursuing art, I watched a lot of videos like this, but most of them were by either professional artists that had gone to art school or been in the industry for a long time, or self-taught artists that had known they wanted to be an artist since they were kids and had a lot of sketchbooks that they did in high school and things like that. And that just wasn't me. So I wanted to make this video to kind of give a different perspective from someone who started art a lot later in life compared to most people. And I thought it would be hopefully encouraging and helpful to hear from someone who taught themselves art at a later stage than most people start learning art, and share my process and things that I did when I first started learning. And while I still think I have a lot to learn, I could not imagine a few years ago that I'd be selling my art products in my own small art shop and sharing my art with people. I think one of the first things I want to say is that I genuinely believe that anyone can learn to do art. I think that it's a skill like anything else that you just have to practice. And while there will be some innately talented people, I think that the majority of people that learn art do it because they love it and they just practice over and over again. So if you think you can't do art, I really truly believe that you can. And if you want to do art, you should just do it. And to kind of go along with this, I just want to say that learning art is a process, and it's not just going to happen overnight or with a magic piece of advice from a YouTube video. I think that one thing I wish I had heard when I first started my art journey, that it's okay to be frustrated with where you're at, or some of the art that you're making at a given time, and that's totally normal. And honestly, about 6 months or a year into my art journey and learning art, I completely quit for almost about a year. And a lot of that was due to the fact that I was just really frustrated with the lack of progress I thought I was making, or not being able to create pieces of art that I really wanted to, and things not looking the way I wanted them to. And I guess I just wish that I had seen a video like this, or just gotten pieces of advice that that happens and that's okay, and kind of just give myself space to realize that I'm growing and this is a process, and just try to enjoy making things at the time and where I was at, instead of getting so frustrated with myself that it made me quit. And I think that I just want to say to you, if you're feeling along the way that you're frustrated, that's totally normal. And I think if you just give yourself some space, take a break for a little bit, but just don't give up, because I really wish that I hadn't given up for so long. I really felt like it was just I couldn't do it. And now I look at my art, and while I still think I have a lot of spaces to grow, I am really proud of what I've been able to achieve. And a few years ago, I would not have been able to do that. So I guess my point is that you're gonna make mistakes, and it's okay, and learn from those mistakes, and try not to get too frustrated with yourself, and just give yourself the space to learn and grow. Because at the end of the day, hopefully you're making art because you like it and that you enjoy it and you want to share what you're creating with people. So whether you're using a pencil and paper, some markers in a sketchbook, or even a tablet or iPad, I think the first stages of learning to draw are all pretty similar. My first step in the learning process was trying to focus on what I would call the fundamentals. And people, I guess, define this in different ways, and it can range from things like shape and form, to color theory, to anatomy, to perspective. But I think the first thing that I would suggest, and what I did, was just focusing on drawing things around me and trying to deconstruct things into simple shapes, and using lines and shading to help give things form. So one thing you can do is just right now, look around the room and just find something that you think would be interesting to draw, and try to deconstruct it into simple shapes. And what I mean by this is there's 3 to 5 different shapes that you can think about: circles and ellipses, squares and rectangles, and triangles. And you can even think about these things in 3D, such as spheres and cylinders, rectangular prisms or cubes, and cones. Most things can generally be broken down into these simple shapes, and when you're able to do that, it gives you a much easier path into figuring out how to translate what you're seeing onto paper. One thing that this really helps with for me is figuring out the different proportions and how the shapes interact with each other. I think the more you get in the habit of trying to figure out how to break things down into different shapes, the easier it'll be to try to draw when you're drawing. Also, I want to say now that it's completely possible to learn how to draw entirely for free using online websites, YouTube channels, and other resources. And in each of these parts, I'm going to give you some of the resources that I used in the beginning and that I still use today. So in terms of just like learning how to draw and like the fundamentals and learning how to make lines and shapes, I think that Proco is a really great YouTube channel. He has a lot of videos ranging from anatomy to just basic forms and shading and just figuring out how to draw in general. So check that out. Also, Mark Brunette has a really great YouTube channel. His videos are more of like a, early 2010s type style of YouTube video. But he has a really good content in my opinion, and it's really fun and engaging. Another content I really love to watch and have learned a lot from is Kasem. He's a Twitch streamer who also uploads most of his Twitch streams and educational content to YouTube, so go check him out. Also, if you're learning digital art, there's a really cool website called Control Paint that goes over a lot of basic and advanced topics in digital art, so go check that out as well. In terms of books, which aren't free unless I guess you can find them with your library, so don't feel like you need to buy these, but some of the books that I use were The Complete Beginner Guide to Drawing. This book is really a basic like drawing book, but I did actually use it a lot in trying to figure out how to draw different things. I also like this book called How to Draw. It's a lot more in-depth and a lot more technical and goes through a lot of things like perspective. So it's a little more advanced, but I think that it's a really comprehensive book. I think another thing to keep in mind when you're first starting out that I really didn't think about or realize in the beginning is that your ability to create lines and like create stable lines is probably not great. And it's just because you're not really practiced most likely in drawing. So I think one thing that I was recommended and that I think really helps is when you're making lines and sketching, try using your arm instead of using just your wrist to sketch larger lines that you want to be more stable. And it can really help with like the stability of the line and just achieving the effect that you want. There's also a lot of fun little exercises that you can do, like connecting dots and drawing lines. A lot of people think they're boring, but I actually kind of found them relaxing, kind of fun, and just practicing like drawing circles and getting myself comfortable with making lines in different shapes. So, there's a bunch of exercises you can try. And I think you can even use some of these exercises and techniques in your drawing to do things like shading, using cross-hatching, or even like little tiny circles to shade different areas in a fun different way. Because I think part of this initial process was obviously trying to get my objects some initial form, trying to look at where like the light and shadows appeared. And that kind of brings me to my next point, which is coloring, which is also like a fundamental art skill, but for me, it's kind of like this entirely different beast. I think in my mind, even now for me, coloring can kind of be boiled down into 3 basic stages: putting down your base colors, your shadows, and your highlights. The thing I said before about looking around and like trying to deconstruct objects into different shapes, I think can also apply to coloring and lighting. So when you're out in the world, just try to like look at different objects from like an artist's perspective and see how like the light is hitting them and where the shadows are and different colors and how those colors are interacting and how they change based on the different lighting conditions. And so I think that's just something that I would suggest doing. I think I wouldn't worry too much about things like color theory in the beginning, and just use what you see around you to help you color and help you define lighting and shadows. In terms of other resources for coloring and lighting, I think Marco Bucci has a lot of really great resources on his YouTube channel. He has a lot of tutorials and just like process videos about how he colors things and lights things. One of my favorite artists, and I think like one of the best people I've ever seen to use light and shadow, is Devin L. Kurtz. She has a lot of really great tutorials and like how she does her process in her little Save Stories section in her Instagram. A couple of the books I would recommend if you're interested on lighting and coloring are Color and Light by James Gurney. This is a pretty classic book that I think a lot of people use. I also really like this book, Artist Master Series, Color and Light. As the title suggests, it goes through things such as color and light and shadows, and also has tutorials from currently popular Instagram and YouTube artists, which is really cool. There's also this book, How to Render, which is the same series as the How to Draw book I mentioned in the last section. All right, so one of the last major things that I want to talk about that I worked on really helped me, I think, with both finding my art style and just like learning how to draw better, and it was like a more fun way to do it. Before I get into this part, I just want to say, from my experience, there's no like easy way to find your art style, and I think that it's something that just kind of develops over time. So I think I got really obsessed with like, finding my style and how to make a style for myself, but I think it's just something that you have to like develop as your process develops and not worry too much about. But I think that one thing that can really help you develop it faster and does really affect it is studying and learning from other people's art that you really admire and kind of doing mini master studies of their work and copying what they do. And I know this sounds really like controversial and kind of like bad, like copying or doing master studies of people's work, but I think if your like intentions are pure and really you're just trying to do it for learning, I think it's totally fine to like reference other people's art and trying to understand the process like they did and trying to replicate that process. I mean, in art school, I've been told, I didn't go to art school, people do master studies all the time where they like try to replicate a famous piece of art. And I think that like the idea is that you're trying to learn the process and how, you know, they put down different brushstrokes and the choices that they made to like make their piece look the way they did. And I think it'll really help you understand like what you like to do and, you know, help influence like what style of art you want to create and how you want to create things and like different techniques you can use. So I think that it's like a super helpful thing to do. And for me, I think this was like one of my favorite parts of like the learning process was just trying to like follow along with like my favorite YouTubers or artists as they had tutorials or draw with me's or process videos and trying to understand like, you know, what they did and how they made pieces look the way they did. And one thing that I didn't realize until very recently, like in the past year or two, that a lot of artists have are free or like really low cost Patreons where they post a lot of like art tutorials or process videos or kind of like behind the scenes things that can really help you learn. So I think that like one thing I'd recommend is if you're interested in a specific artist, go check out if they have like a Patreon because a lot of times they will have like either free or like low cost resources that are really helpful in my opinion. So some of my favorite resources and specifically YouTube channels for tutorials and process videos, for environmental art specifically, James Juliet Art has a lot of really amazing tutorials and just walkthroughs. He goes through literally every step that he does to create a digital painting, and it's a really great resource. I also really like Blue Biscuits. She has a lot of really cool and fun videos that go through different tutorials from coloring and shading, just how she does her style. Some of my favorite Patreons, and again, these are like very specific to my art style, so you might not like them, but Greta Lusky, I think she's like my favorite contemporary artist of all time. She has a very like stylized comic book type style art, and I really love her. She has a lot of great tutorials on her Patreon. I also really like the Patreons of Lotus Bubble and Chrisabug. They also have a lot of great tutorials, so if you're interested in them, go check them out. And if you're into more like stylized type portraits or paintings of people, and you're familiar with like Sam Does Art or Ross Draws, they both have really great resources on their Patreons. And I think that the content there is a lot more based on tutorials and behind the scenes things and educational content than their YouTube channels. So I would recommend really going to check them out if you're interested in that kind of art. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope that sharing just some of these few tips and things that I did when I was starting on my art journey are hopefully inspiring and helpful for you if you're starting out. If you have any questions or want any further or specific advice, please comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like. And if you want more content like this or follow along as I share my art and small business journey, please consider subscribing. So thank you again for watching this video, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night, and I will see you next time. Bye!